Hi students, in this video we're going to look at how to compare box plots. Right, so after watching this video you should be able to describe and contrast data that's been provided for you in a box plot. Alright, so the things to recall for this video, you have to be able to recall how to generate a 5-number summary, you should be able to recall how to draw a box plot, and also how to describe data in terms of modality, so does it have 1 or 2 or 3 modes, in terms of shape, whether it's symmetrical or whether there's a skew to it, the difference between positive and negative, the definition of outliers, and also the definition of spread. Alright, so there are key things to do when comparing box plots. First step is to compare medians. The second is to compare spread. So with our spread, we might talk about the interquartile range in particular. You might also refer to the spread more generally. You might then need to identify outliers, and then finally compare the shape, whether it's symmetrical, and then negative or positive skew. Alright, so let's do an example. So we're going to look at 2 box plots that show the overnight price for accommodation in 2 nearby coastal towns, Surfside and Port Eagle. Now we have to write a paragraph comparing the data in the box plots. So in terms of our paragraph, we do want to use a peel paragraph. So in our peel, we want to have our point, and our topic sentence should have the main point of comparison in it. So once we do looking at our 4 factors here, we want to then work out what's the biggest point of difference, what's the biggest thing we want to talk about in terms of their differences or similarities. And that's what we want to identify in our point. E&E, we've got our explain and evidence. Okay, so explain, we want to explain each of our 4 factors, and evidence, we need to provide numbers. Okay, for each of the things we're saying. Finally, at the end, we've got our link sentence. Now, really, our link sentence is there to help us either make a judgment by linking to our point, or restating our point, or by linking to our next paragraph. In this situation, we're not really asked to make a judgment, so we're not really going to worry too much about the link paragraph in this one. But if it's asking us to make a judgment or an evaluation, then we need to, in that link sentence, really link our paragraph back to our question or back to our point. All right, so let's do some examples here. We've got to compare the medians. So looking at our data up here, the Surfside, let's drop that one down. Right, that's about $210 per night. So the medians are roughly the same. Okay, so we can write that the medians are similar. For Surfside, it's going to be 210. For Port Eagle, it's going to be 220. Now let's consider the spread. Now the spread is where we're going to find a lot of difference here. So let's talk about the interquartile ranges. All right, so for Surfside, the 3rd quartile, it's about 240. The 1st quartile is 180. So $240 a night minus $180 a night is $60 per night difference. For Port Eagle, we're going between 300 and 120. All right, so this is a significant difference. So for Surfside, $60 a night difference in their interquartile range. For Port Eagle, 180 is 3 times the size. So this factor here, our spread, is going to be a key difference, and that should be discussed in our comparison paragraph. That's probably even strong enough to be a part of our point because there is such a significant difference there. All right, in terms of outliers, we do have a couple of outliers up here. They're not that much higher than the scores at Port Eagle, so they're not really super remarkable. They're outliers for Surfside, that's true. So for Surfside, there's 2 outliers. They look like they're about $350 to $360 per night. But they're not outside the ballpark of like the high values for Portugal either. So there's some similarities there. In terms of shape, for Surfside, if we don't consider the outliers, both sides of Surfside, they look very similar. So in terms of length in our box plot, so we can say it's roughly symmetrical. Or there's also a slight negative skew, because that left side looks like it's slightly longer than the right. Now looking at Portugal, the right hand side is there, the left hand side is here. That dark blue side, the left hand side, does look a good chunk longer than the right hand side for Portugal. So for Portugal, that one's got a negative skew, because that left side, that lower side, that negative side, is much more spread out. So that means we've got a negative skew. What that means is we have a greater spread, or we have lower options, lower prices on the left-hand side for Portugal. Right? We have lower cost accommodation, more so than higher cost. So it's still 50% of accommodation is less than 220, but there's a few more that are much further away from 220 on the lower end compared to on the higher end. Now, those four things can then be used to help us write our paragraph. All right, here's my crack at a paragraph, and we can just we'll work through it as we go. So generally, the price to stay overnight in Surfside is more consistent than in Portugal. So there's my topics, and it's talking largely about spread. So Surfside has a lower spread; it had a much lower IQR, so we can say it's more consistent. Now, while the median values are very similar, so I've talked about the medians and I've provided evidence. The interquartile range, and this is where I'm getting into my point here. More of my explanation. The interquartile range is, what's that, $60 a night compared to $190 in Portugal. So using my data to back up the point. And this makes the accommodation in Surfside more consistent than Portugal. Then discussing the outliers. So we've got some outliers in Surfside, and again pointing out those values. I've even given a bit of an explanation, most likely luxury accommodation. So we've got our luxury accommodations probably up here, but most of the other places of accommodation are in that lower range between 100 and 300. Right, in terms of skew, the accommodation in Portugal has a negative skew, indicating that it has more accommodation on the cheaper end of the scale. Surfside's accommodation is symmetrically distributed, excluding the outliers, indicating a variety of accommodation options and different prices. Right, so that's what symmetrically means. Either side, they're about the same size. So between the top and the bottom, there's a good spread of different accommodation options. All right, so students, after watching this video, you should be able to describe and contrast the data provided in a box plot.